So, Mike, let us know a little bit about your personal experience. Like, where did you grow up? What did you study?
Well, I initially grew up in New York City and then went to Cornell University and studied engineering, and then went to Stanford and studied more engineering, and ended up in the aerospace business for quite a long time, which was then the basis for starting my first company, which is now part of Intel. So that kind of got me started on the entrepreneurship track. And after we took that company public, I went into the venture capital business for quite a long time with about 5 different funds, including one of my own. Uh, and now, these days, I'm more on the operating side again and starting companies. So I'm working on my 9th startup right now. And so we'll see how that goes. And I've been teaching entrepreneurship in the Stanford Engineering School since 1988.
So, wow, that's a lot. Let me ask you, when you started your career, did you have this clear vision that you wanted to be an entrepreneur, create your own business?
No. When I started out, I was an engineer. I was learning the trade, and I wanted to get an engineering job so I could learn how to do it. And gravitated into the aerospace field and had a 15-year career with Lockheed Martin, now called Lockheed Martin. Not at the time, but it is now. Yeah. And I was at the Lockheed Research Lab in Palo Alto for about half of that time.
When you started as an investor, did you reach back to guys who you might have known previously from New York or from the Wall Street type of financing industry? Did you think those two worlds could connect?
No. And as a matter of fact, certainly at the time and certainly now, the Wall Street focus is mostly on investment banking and doesn't have really much to do with early stage venture investing at all. The business models are entirely different, and there's not much overlap. Actually, the overlap only occurs in private equity when the early stage venture gets to be very late stage and much more successful, to where financial engineering models start to work really well in investing. And there are certainly private equity funds that focus very much on very late stage investing like that and do it very successfully. Yeah.
And maybe sometimes these worlds might touch themselves when there is a big IPO coming from the tech side, like from the Valley.
Well, certainly when a tech company gets to the point where it can float its shares on the public markets, I've done a few of those with my companies, but that's not where I focus. My focus is on the very earliest stages of getting companies started and building the teams that you need to make the company successful. So I will frequently take a technology out of a government laboratory, for example, and build a management team around that so that we can execute and raise money and build a company.
When you started teaching, did you have like a goal of helping people become entrepreneurs, or you just wanted them to learn a specific field?
No, I believe economic improvement is produced principally by entrepreneurs. And so my goal was to create more entrepreneurs. And I also started doing that kind of training because when I started out, there really wasn't any. And we had to figure all of it out ourselves, and we made a lot of mistakes. And now with these programs becoming much more sophisticated, we can't really create an entrepreneur because that's in the guy's head, but we can surely teach them how to do it right and not make a lot of these traditional mistakes. And that process is important now more than ever because the pace of innovation keeps increasing. And so the time that you have to make these errors and fix them is getting shorter and shorter. So the training is now much more important than it was, say, 30 years ago.
And do you think it becomes easier for other countries, like we are in Brazil now, because we have these models coming out of the Silicon Valley as the accelerators, this type of programs? Do they make everything simpler?
Well, yes and no. The Silicon Valley models, you have to remember the Silicon Valley is a constant stage of experimentation with things that sometimes work and sometimes don't. That's the nature of the valley. It's constantly undergoing innovation. But there's something else going on there that it goes way beyond accelerators and all that stuff, and that is government policy, tax policy, labor laws, intellectual property protection, and many of the things I talked about in my talk earlier today. And unless you fix those things, it's very difficult to build the kind of infrastructure we have there. We can literally start a company in Silicon Valley in one day, all in, and we can close it just as fast. Okay, and so it's early stage companies, remember, don't really know what they're doing. They're trying to figure that out, and they may have to change business models rapidly, change their product focus, change their personnel very quickly, and eventually many of these things just won't work, just because they're hard to do, and victory is difficult. And so the culture has to be very accepting of this failure. So remember that maybe more than 70% of all the VC-backed companies don't work. So what do you do with all those people? Well, they just go into another company or start something new. It isn't that the people aren't talented. It's, well, the idea wasn't quite right, the timing wasn't quite right. There are all kinds of factors that can cause something to not work. That doesn't mean the talent is bad. So you've got to say, okay, well, that didn't work, let's try it again. And there's a lot of that going on in Silicon Valley.
So part of the message is, if we would like to be a country which is more innovative, it doesn't take only better entrepreneurs and better programs, but it needs better institutions, better policy, better government in a way.
Yeah, it needs all that. It needs institutional support. It needs government financing of basic research, which is very important in universities and laboratories, because later stage or venture investment money is not prepared to take that kind of risk. They're only going to invest when they see a product market fit. Well, basic research, we don't even know what the product is, much less that stuff. So we need a source of non-equity, high-risk grant money, which has to come from public-private partnerships or the government. That's the only real source of it.
As a matter of fact, all the companies you have funded or helped fund, are they all technical founders? Are they all out of basic research or no?
Yeah, pretty much. I've spun a lot of companies out of government labs. all the companies I've been involved in starting are very heavy tech companies. These are very hard things to build. They're difficult. They are not games on iPhones. They're hard. And all of the basic research for those products came from some kind of government or public-private partnership funding initially. Now, not later. The productization of those technologies was funded by private investors, because the government sources don't fund productization. That's not their role.
Do you think we have to pay attention to market trends as maybe e-health or something like this? Or like what has worked for you?
Well, I think the most successful venture investors are contrarians. They don't go with trends, because if there is a trend running and it's obvious to everybody, then the capital asset pricing model from economics tells you the returns aren't going to be very good. So why are you doing that? What you want to find is something that's not obvious, but could be very disruptive if it works. And usually those deals, most people, the trends people will tell you, oh, that will never work. That's when the deal gets interesting. When a lot of people tell you, oh, this will never work, that's when I start to get interested. I perk up and I go, oh, this could be good. When people tell you it will not work, now we could be looking at a really big return. And look at how many things Apple has done, and people said, oh, that'll never work. You can't do that. Well, take a look at that one, okay? And we're working on a company right now where people are telling us, oh, that'll never work. Okay, I like that.
That's quite something. As a final question, I would like to know if you have had the chance to learn a little bit about Brazilian businesses, Brazilian tech, Brazilian opportunities, and if yes, then what do you think about them?
Yes, a little bit, because I have a number of venture friends who are working down here with companies, and you know, we've started actually doing some work with them in building companies and so on, and so it's very promising, I would say. It's an emerging venture market here, but there's a lot of bureaucratic friction that needs to get dealt with to really make this a robust environment. And if you know, members of the government are willing to step up and do that, then I think the prospects are really exciting down here.
Well, thank you and have a good time in Brazil.
Thanks very much. I appreciate it.